I'm live. Easter Sunday still. I'm going out later, but I thought I'll read one more chapter. I had not read this book before, even though I've had it many years in my collection of Joan Grants books. But strangely enough, I didn't read this one, so I'm myself looking forward to knowing what happens next. This is So Moses Was Born. Joan Grant was a writer of her farm memories. This book is about a life as Nebunefer, who is going to become an uncle to Moses. He was originally heir to the throne, but a different decision was made. The Pharaoh is dying, and this chapter is about Queen Tuaa. This obviously placed many thousands of years ago, before Moses was born, so that gives you an idea about the timing. Queen Tuaa. There are times when a man does not have to be an initiate to know how it feels to fight with the warriors of the underworld. False pride and self-pity squeezed my heart so cruelly that I nearly cried out that I should shatter the peace of my father's dying and seethe Egypt in the dark broth of civil war, rather than suffer the humiliation of accepting the placid future my wife considered suitable to my powers. Anger flared sweat from my body until I felt I should die of thirst unless I could plunge into cool, clear water. So strong did this longing for coolness become that I stripped off my sodden kilt and plunged into the shallow pool under the mulberry tree. Sensen came into the garden and stood smiling down at me. I realized how foolish I must look, with the stalks of broken lotus clinging to my legs and bewildered fish darting in search of somewhere they could hide from this monster, which had suddenly intruded on their quietness. Before she could speak, I said defiantly, "Am I also too young to be trusted not to be drowning, even in such a small puddle, unless you support me under the chin?" I left the water with as much dignity as I could assemble. "Surely you brought a towel for me," I said. "Mina always insists that children should dry between their toes." She sat down on a bench and looked at me in frank amazement. "Neb, what are you doing? If you want to wallow among the lilies as though you were a hippopotamus in a mud hole, why shouldn't you? But you needn't be cross about it." "Why not? A child is allowed to be cross if someone deliberately breaks his favorite toy, so why shouldn't I be cross when my crook and fail are broken?" "My love, of course, you have every right to be angry, but you can't be angry with me, Neb, dear Neb. I thought you would understand. Perhaps I ought to have told you yesterday, but I was afraid if I did, we should have talked, and I would never have been really sure that you have made your own decision. I congratulate you, my clever little wife, who is so clever that she knows her husband will always do as she wishes. If I make a tentative suggestion, it would have been more tactful to postpone the packing, so that I could cherish the illusion of making up my own mind. Neb, you're being horribly unfair, and you know it." Doubting Sensen was such an unfamiliar experience that I began to doubt myself. "Forgive me if I appear unappreciative of your efforts on my behalf. I feel sure that had I returned from the palace with the news that tomorrow you would be queen of the two lands, you would have told Mina to unpack discreetly. Nab, you often told me, sometimes sounding nearly as pompous as Karadin, that it is unseemly to give judgment without full knowledge of the facts. If I have ever given you the right to suspect me of disloyalty, you can go on glowering. If not, you had better sit down and listen." I sat down, but still refused to take the hand she tried to insert between my clenched fingers. "I am listening," I said coldly. "If it wasn't so important, I wouldn't bother to speak to you like this while you are being so horrid. But I haven't time to wait until you stop behaving like an ill-mannered child. Forgive me if I appear stupid, but being treated like a child is apt to limit the understanding to the narrow field of an infant. I might remind you that in all humility, that breast milk does not lie easily in the stomach of a grown man." I thought Sensen was going to slap me, but with an effort she controlled the impulse. An impulse which I secretly acknowledged was fully justified, and instead clasped her hand around her knees. I started to pack because I did not know whether we might be going. I did know that we should have to leave Thebes. I suppose it did not occur to you that your husband might be interested to know why he was being expected to make such a precipitate journey, or would flight be a more honest word? Neb, please stop talking like Karadin. This is no moment to be clever with words. Not that it is ever clever deliberately to misunderstand what somebody is trying to say. You must listen. You have my ear, I said, nearly. You have the royal ear. Habit takes more killing than eel. I happen to be fond of your ears, both of them, and that's why you won't be able to make me lose my temper, however hard you try. How long were you listening outside the window? Oh, Neb, don't be so touchy. Of course I didn't mind you listening, but I want to know how much you heard, so I shan't waste time repeating myself. Everything from the moment when you were insisting on taking the monkey with you, I said reluctantly. Then you've been less right than I thought for being so obtuse, she said briskly. The captain of the bodyguard and Usamentu are backing Ramoses, so our best chance of defeating them, if you insist on civil war, is to go north to try to get the army of the Reed to follow you against the army of the Bee. If you stay here, you'll be murdered the moment father is dead. Tuaa has already arranged it. It's not easy to murder a pharaoh, I said grandly, trying to hide in the shreds of my forced pride. Oh, yes, it is, when he doesn't know who, if anyone, in the palace can be trusted. You couldn't openly accuse Tuaa. No one would believe you. Poison in your wine, the wheel of your chariot breaking, a snake in your bed. Don't you understand how easy it would be for her? Oh, Ned, please don't be so stubborn. And she could kill you, I said slowly. She could make me afraid to leave you even for an hour. Making me even more of a shackle than she's made me already. If only I liked her, I might have been able to understand her wickedness sooner. Oh, Ned, I have been such a fool. I didn't mind being ill because it meant you stayed with me, instead of going away for months with Pharaoh or the army. I thought Tuaa was kind to encourage you to stay, and when I tried to be unselfish, she produced such reasonable excuses. What excuses? She said that it was my duty to keep you with me, so that we lost no opportunity of starting a baby. Realizing that Tuaa has used me against you hasn't been comfortable, Neb. Forgive me, Sensen, I didn't understand. Then you're not cross anymore. So very far from cross. Oh, my dear, I'm such a fool. No wonder father chooses Ramoses. Sensen, you say the captain of the bodyguard is in the plot? I've told you that twice already. The threats Tuaa was weaving suddenly began to show a meticulous pattern. Now I understand why Bakur is so eager to offer us hospitality. I begin to see everything much more clearly. See what? She asked quickly. Tuaa's plan of campaign. She would have made an admirable captain of captains. What a loss for Egypt that her command of strategy could not have been used against the Hittites. You and I were to have sailed down the river this evening. If the wind drops, as it almost certainly will, when the moon rises, we were to spend the night at Bakur's house. She would have made some excuse to keep us there until she received word from Tuaa, and then... Sensen finished the sentence, and then we would be murdered. One finds it difficult not to admire Tuaa's attention to detail. To arrange our death at Bakur's is so much easier than at the palace. Crocodiles are another neat detail, said Sensen. No extra bodies to deflect any of the glory from Seti's funeral. She shivered. I would almost prefer the belly of a crocodile to a royal tomb, especially if we were eaten by the same crocodile. We ought to leave Thebes tonight, but we shall have to risk waiting at least another day until I can think of somewhere for you to be safe while I arrange how we can travel. Do you suppose I've done nothing but pack since yesterday morning? I forgot. I hadn't told you about Hebor. Father's body servant? Yes, in the presence of Pharaoh, he swore lifelong allegiance to you. He is the only royal attendant that Seti knew would always be loyal to us. You see, he knew your mother and was the only person who had the courage to implore Seti not to marry Tuaa. He has been twice to the living water, so he knows the best way for us to go there. The tracks are too rough for chariots, so we shall use pack donkeys. The 6 servants who always travel with us will join Hebor in the cave above the Valley of the Dead, between sunset and dawn tonight. Only 4 of the men are trained litter bearers, but the others will soon learn to keep in step, 2 to each litter and 2 to relieve them when we have to make forced marches. I don't need a litter, I protested. But Mina does. Think how she'd grumble if she had to walk for days and days. You haven't sent your own litter, I asked quickly. My love, I have grown up since yesterday. Hebor will provide litter suitable to our disguise. Only 2 bearers, curtains of coarse linen, and pallets stuffed with straw. How far do you expect us to go before we are recognized? Prince Nebunefer and his wife are not entirely unknown in Egypt. How many people have seen us as we really are? Do you think that even I could recognize you from a carving on one of Seti's stelae? She ran her fingers through her hair and swept it back from her wide forehead. Do you think they would recognize me if they saw me now? However often they had seen the little Princess Sensen, determinedly smiling, although her ceremonial wig had given her a headache. Even a very minor noble would travel with more than a few pack donkeys. But will they be quite suitable to a fairly prosperous trader who is on his way to Punt with his wife and his mother to find merchandise suitable for barter in some of the smaller towns? His mother? Mina, if you prefer it, she can be my mother. That will allow you to grumble about her when you exchange a few rather nasty beads for enough to feed us all until the next village. My love, I have been most efficient. I even remembered to give her boy 3 gold armlets to exchange for things the merchant would be likely to take with him to please village women. She was so confident that it was only with the greatest reluctance that I said, the moment that Tuaa discovers we have escaped from Thebes, she will have to find us. I don't want to frighten you, but you must realize that our flight will prove that we have discovered her plot. She will think I've gone into hiding until I can raise the north against her. Every house that might give us shelter will be searched. Every track followed by soldiers loyal to Rameses. Instead of being dismayed, Sensen laughed. It takes a queen to outwit a queen, so I've earned the white crown, even though Nefertari will wear it. Tuaa had let it be known that she would like everyone to believe we had died by drowning, but she was far too clever to give a direct order to anyone. Though the unspoken bargain was that whoever implemented her intention would not lack the royal favor. When the boat in which we sailed so innocently down the river is found capsized, no one will be suspicious, for the sail is too big and Rameses capsized it himself only 3 days ago. Luckily for him, it was close to a barge and he was pulled out of the water before he had swum more than a few strokes. She laughed again. It is a delightful comedy, Neb. Bakua will look at her husband, yet be too discreet to ask, did you do it so that I should not reap the royal favor? Okay, bye-bye. Nice to see you. The captain will stare at the priest. The scribe suspect the fan-bearer, but Tuaa will be content as a cat who does not care whose hand flung the throwing stick, so long as her dish is filled with raw meat. At Tuaa's order, search will be made for us. Magnificent reward offered to the first who brings news that will assuage the queen's anguish. Every clump of reeds up and down the river will be trampled flat, but no one will search more fervently than those privy to the plot. For each will feel he must find us in case another had blundered, and one of us were still alive. Even a spark of life in our nostrils, so they will argue, would be enough to set the palace intrigue in flames that would roar louder than a fire in a straw stack. When we are not found, there will be the greatest crocodile hunt in history, for Tuaa will insist that our remains receive honorable burial. The embalmers will search through the records, trying to discover a precedent by which they can decide which piece of crocodile can properly be placed in our canopic jars. When your armlet, the one you are now wearing that Seti gave you when he declared you the royal heir, and my favorite necklace are found in the belly of the same crocodile, the embalmers will have yet another problem. 4 canopic jars or 8. What Ushakti figure, if any, should be included in a mummy that is no more than hundreds of cubits of bandages round the core of a crocodile bone? I found my admiration of Sensen increasing with every moment, but I suspect her of letting her imagination outrun her acceptance of the fact. How will you get the crocodile to cooperate? Have you forgotten that the gods expect us to use our intelligence? She said in mock severity. Your armlet and my necklace will be carefully embedded in a chunk of meat. We will drop it over the side of the boat when we see a crocodile large enough to provide a suitable sarcophagus. Brother, I've forgotten something. We must have rotten meat, or the crocodiles may leave it to ripen in his larder under the bank. I was glad to be able to prove myself not entirely useless. Ramosis, unfortunately, is overconfident in the boy who looks after his lion cubs. I noticed this morning that the stench coming from the storeroom next to their kennels was overpowering. To save a lion from having to eat food fit for vulture is a kindly gesture. I had already decided whether I raised the north or waited until Ramosis had proved himself unworthy to rule was of secondary importance to Sensen's immediate safety. Father wished her to go to the living water. It was my duty to take her there. The evening wind rustled the leaves of the mulberry trees. It will be sunset in an hour, I said. Does Mina come with us? She will leave here before dawn with the pack donkeys that take our personal things. One of the servants goes with her, and the top layer of each pannier will be fruit or vegetables. Anyone who notices them will think Mina is taking farm produce to sell to the tomb workers. When she reaches the defile leading to the valley, Hebo will be there to show her the way up to the cave. She kissed me. I must see she's got everything ready, and you must fetch the lion's meat. I hope you have a lovely Sunday. This was the 5th reading, and the next one is Food for a Crocodile. The story of Pharaoh and Ramosis. And